Welcome to the SANCTION Framework Introduction, Domains, and Storing Overview video by Student Development Associates. My name is Ben and I'll be your host for this video. Our agenda for today is pretty straightforward. We're going to go over what SANCTION is and does not, the 8 domains of SANCTION, storing, sanctioning recommendations, and then special considerations to keep in mind. So what is SANCTION? SANCTION is an aid for determining appropriate educational sanctions for students who have engaged in misconduct. It's a way to ensure equitable, similar sanctions for similar behavior, and it is a holistic view of students who have engaged in misconduct. The goal of SANCTION is very simple. It is to help make sure that similar, equitable sanctions are given for similar behaviors in different conduct cases and in large, complex cases where equitable sanctions are crucial. What SANCTION is not. SANCTION is not a hard and fast set of rules for addressing misconduct. That is the role of your student code of conduct or your student handbook or other policy document. SANCTION is not able to measure the social and psychological aspects of misconduct either. It is not a clinical assessment tool. It is a measurement tool to help you determine appropriate sanctions. It is also not for addressing behavioral or mental health concerns. Behavioral and mental health concerns are not code of conduct violations, and we will get into that when we talk about special considerations in a little bit. It is also not a comprehensive list of sanctions. You, as the hearing officer, are still going to use your wisdom and insight to determine the best course of action for students to show that they have learned and will not engage in this behavior in the future. And SANCTION is not able to determine what specific actions will help a student develop. Again, your wisdom and insight are crucial. This is simply a tool to help you ensure that you are having similar, equitable sanctions across large or complex cases. To assist you with determining appropriate sanctions, SANCTION uses 8 domains which are independently stored to provide a final overall score. In this section of the video, we're going to go over the 8 domains of SANCTION and the 4 scores that are given in each domain. Domain 1 is severity. Severity is how serious the misconduct is, how much harm was done or threatened upon the campus or other people, and if there are any mandatory or minimum sanctions to account for. Severity is essentially the amount of harm to people, places, or things that we are worried about. With severity 0, we have no harm done or threatened to any persons or places on campus. This could be things where there may be a victimless policy violation, such as a candle in the residence hall, or something similar. With severity level 1, we have some small harm to other people or places. This is short-term, readily resolved harm to campus or others. Minor damage to a building, such as damage to a single door, a window screen, a patch of carpet. It could also include unintended minor harm to other people. Accidents that happen on campus could be severity level 1. With severity 2, we're dealing with moderate damage to a building, a flooded bathroom, a hole in the wall, a door knocked off its hinges, things like that. And intentional but minor harm to another person, such as spitting on someone or acting in such a way that they have a small amount of harm that does not require any sort of medical intervention. Severity 3, we're dealing with major damage to a building. A fire, multiple holes in the wall, hazardous chemicals, biohazards. Major harm to another person has occurred. Multiple strikes, armed strikes, use of a weapon against someone else. Or the policy may require suspension or expulsion. Sometimes our policies will dictate that we suspend or expel someone, in which case we should immediately go ahead and say this is a severity 3. Our institution has determined that to be the case. The second domain, attitude. Attitude is how the student responds to the misconduct and the allegations that they have violated some policy. With attitude level 0, the student is open and aware of the misconduct and they're seeking to better themselves. They're actively engaged in trying to understand themselves and move forward and develop. With attitude 1, they are aware of issues that they could have handled the situation better, but they're unsure of what better includes. With attitude level 2, a student acknowledges they should not have engaged in the misconduct and they place blame for their action on others. They say, yes, I understand that I should not have struck that person. However, they should not have provoked me to punching them. Attitude 2 can also be for less severe incidents, something like saying, I was never told that. I would have never broken this. It's not my fault that I didn't know that this candle wasn't allowed in the residence halls. Things like that. With attitude 3, the student denies any responsibility in the misconduct. All of the blame is on others. Keep in mind, this is not saying that the student is not accepting responsibility for the policy violation. In this case, the student is denying any responsibility for the misconduct. They are saying, I did not engage in anything wrong. Even if I took this action, the action was not misconduct. Domain 3, needs. Needs are how well the needs psychologically, physically, and socially of the student are being met. These are things such as housing, personal safety, and psychological support and well-being. At needs level 0, the student's needs are almost entirely met. They might be entirely met, but they are almost entirely met for sure. Support systems for the student are intact and fruitful. Family, friends, other people are there for the student. They have a team, they have support. With needs level 1, the student has 1 or 2 needs that could be met better, but they are not in crisis or need of an intervention. They may be struggling to find a job, but they are not homeless, for instance. Support is warranted, but it's not necessarily lacking. This is a student who could use a little bit more support, but they are not actively lacking support. With needs level 2, the student has multiple needs that are not being met. An intervention here may be appropriate because support is severely lacking. They need someone in their corner. They need someone to support them and provide additional aid. Needs level 3, we have a student who is in active crisis or distress. We're talking about someone who is having an actual psychotic break, someone who is actively engaged in self-injurious behavior, might be engaged in self-harm in a bad environment at home, maybe in a domestic violence situation. Something drastic is happening for this student. And the behavioral care team should be notified and engaged immediately, and we might even pause the conduct case in order to ensure that the student's needs are being met. The next domain, career. Career is how drastically the behavior may lead to negative career outcomes. Essentially, how acceptable is this behavior in the workplace? At career level 0, this behavior has minimal to no career implications. Candles in the residence hall are not going to be an issue for most students when they go off into their workplace. They'll be allowed or not allowed, but it's unlikely that there will be any actual issues if they have a candle in their office. Career level 1 is minor career implications. The behavior is discouraged in the workplace, but not likely to lead to termination of employment. With career level 2, we're dealing with behavior that is likely to lead to consequences and may lead to termination if repeated in a career setting. This is actions such as engaging in verbal altercations, refusing to comply with instructions, things of that nature. With career 3, we're talking about issues where a single incident of the behavior can lead to termination in the workplace. Harm to others, engaging in a physical altercation, things of that nature. Next, we have the timing domain. Timing is how close in time this incident is to other incidents. Oftentimes, conduct officers will refer to a pattern of behavior, That is what the timing domain is capturing. With timing 0, we have a incident that is a one-off or a standalone incident. The student might have had an educational conversation in the past. They might have even been in our office for something unrelated in the distant past. But this new incident is new. It is different behavior that we are not accustomed to. With timing 1, the student has prior incidents, nothing in the last year generally. We see this as behavior that might be slipping back into old patterns or coping strategies when they face new challenges. With timing level 2, the student has multiple prior incidents that have occurred in the last 12 months, and there's a pattern of misconduct at specific times or in certain situations. There are certain stressors that we might identify that are leading the student to engage in this behavior when these certain stressors or conditions are met. With timing 3, we have an obvious pattern of misconduct close in time to each other. Multiple incidents have occurred in a single semester. We see an ongoing, consistent pattern of misconduct from this student. The next domain, intent. Intent is whether the student sought to engage in the misconduct or if it was accidental. This is similar to severity, however, we need to keep intent in mind as we design our sanctions, therefore it's its own separate domain. With intent 0, we're saying the conduct was entirely accidental or from a place of understandable ignorance. This would be something where perhaps a student falls asleep when they are drawing a bath and they accidentally flood their bathroom to some degree. Or perhaps they are moving too many things and they accidentally break a light fixture. Things like that. With intent 1, the conduct was done from ignorance, but the student would have known it was not allowed to had they read the relevant policies. For instance, having a candle in the residence hall is often not allowed with policy, and a student would probably know that if they read what was and was not allowed in their welcome packet. With intent 2, the student is aware the behavior might be misconduct and chose to engage in it anyways. So they have read the policy, they have been informed of the policy, whatever may be the case, and they have said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and move forward with it. Maybe it'll come back and bite me in the rear end later, but I'm going to go ahead and do it for now. With intent 3, the student has been informed that such behavior is not allowed, but chose to engage in it. This would be something where perhaps the student has engaged in the behavior multiple times in the past. They may have been required to attend a meeting or a workshop where the behavior is described as not allowed. It might have been part of their welcome packet or something that their RA or community assistant said when they moved into their residence hall, things of that nature. The next domain is openness. Openness is how open the student is to growing and developing from the situation. This is similar to attitude in that the student has to want to grow, want to develop. However, with openness, we are not talking about whether or not the student is saying, yes, I understand I made a mistake and I should not have done this. We are talking about their forward-looking progress and how much they are looking to change and develop from this. With openness is 0, the student is fully open to growing and learning from the incident. They are actively seeking to come up with ways to not engage in the behavior in the future. If they have an attitude 0, they probably, hopefully, have an openness 0 score as well. However, that's not guaranteed. With openness 1, the student is open to growing and learning from the incident, but is not actively engaged in doing so. They want support, they want to grow, they're not sure how to do it. You can be that support system. With openness 2, the student is resistant to growing and learning from the experience. They may acknowledge the behavior was not appropriate and contend that it is not something they can or should change. Similar to how with attitude, they may say, this behavior was not good, but it's not my fault. With openness 2, we have students who say, yeah, that's not right, but that's who I am. I'm not changing. We're dealing with someone with a fixed mindset instead of a growth mindset, probably. And then finally, with openness 3, we have a student who's defiant and unwilling to discuss or entertain change. This is a student who says, no, I did not do anything wrong. I am not going to change. This is what I chose to do, and I did the right thing even. With nature, we're talking about how complicated the misconduct was and if it required preparation or not. So while intent is talking about whether or not the student intended to violate policy, nature is talking about how many steps were required for the policy to be violated. So with nature 0, we have minor misconduct. Misconduct that's very likely unintentional or rising from ignorance. Not many steps, if any, were taken that caused the misconduct to occur. With nature 1, we have mild misconduct coming from ignorance, failure to sufficiently plan for eventualities or other instances. This could also come from passion or heat of the moment decisions. With nature 2, we have moderate misconduct. This has required a few minutes of pre-planning or preparation. It's showing the policy was intentionally violated, but it was limited in scope. This would be something where perhaps someone gets angry at someone in a dining hall and chooses to follow this person across campus to their residence hall or to a classroom to address them and to engage in a verbal altercation. And with nature 3, we have major misconduct, where extensive preparation or many steps were required to continue or engage in the misconduct. This is where we have themes such as engaging in scamming activities, taking money from other students, setting up and preparing for a fight, or something of that nature. So you've gone through, you've scored a student on each of the 8 domains of sanction, and now you're ready to score them and determine what type of sanction might be appropriate for them. This is a very simple formula. You take the severity score and multiply it by 10. Then you're going to add the sum of the other scores, 0 through 3 for each one. This is your total score. It will be somewhere between 0 and 51. With the SANCTION framework, we do provide sanctioning recommendations for minor, mild, moderate, and 2 levels of major misconduct. However, you are the hearing officer. You are the conduct professional. You are the one who will be tasked with determining what is actually appropriate for the student based on the misconduct and the actions they took. However, if you find yourself in a large case, in a complicated case with multiple students, we encourage you to look at the scores and make sure that similar scores receive similar sanctions. What you don't want to have happen is someone scoring a 4 or a 5 as their overall score, but receiving a mild sanction, and then another student receiving a 9 or a 12 and receiving a minor sanction that's more appropriate for 0 through 7. You want to ensure consistency and that the level of misconduct addresses the level of the sanction. So with that in mind, what are the different sanctioning levels? We broke it down into 5 tiers. For scores of 0 through 7, we suggest minor sanctions, a reprimand, a warning, and a small deliverable, a 1-page reflection paper, a poster showing why the policy exists and how to avoid breaking it, something like that, just to show that the student has learned from the behavior and will take steps to not engage in it in the future. With a score of 8 to 17, we recommend mild sanctions. This would be a reprimand or a warning, a small deliverable, and a workshop or service project. With 18 through 24, we recommend moderate sanctions. This will include conduct probation, a moderate-sized deliverable, such as a 3 to 5 page reflection paper, or a longer video in the 5 to 10 minute range, something like that, and or multiple workshops addressing the behavior and the policies that were violated. With 25 to 29, we get into major sanctions level 1, which is where probation is appropriate and suspension might be appropriate depending on the details of the situation. A large deliverable is also worthwhile here. Workshops and campus restrictions. not allowing the student to live in the residence halls, not allowing them to access the area of campus where the misconduct occurred, things like that might be appropriate here. And with 30 plus, we have major sanctions level 2. This is where suspension or expulsion are worthwhile and should be considered. If expulsion is not done, if it is suspension, then a large deliverable should also be included upon the student's return to campus. Campus restrictions should be put in place to ensure that the student does not go into the area where the misconduct occurred again, and quite possibly a trespass order could be put in place to ensure that the student avoids the area or avoids the people who were associated with the misconduct. There are two special considerations to keep in mind when you're dealing with sanction as well. Some misconduct may be so severe that policy requires a suspension or expulsion. If that's the case, then you should immediately score at severity level 3 in order to make sure that the score goes into that major sanction territory so that you are able to notice and ensure that appropriate sanctions are given to match your policy without requiring you to artificially inflate the other 7 scores. Also, meeting the needs of a student might supersede their conduct process and require referral to the behavioral care team. If you score a student on a needs 2 or a needs 3, pause, consider whether or not you need to talk to the student, take them to your counseling area, refer them to your behavioral concerns team. Make sure their needs are met before you engage in the conduct process. So in summary, the SANCTION framework encourages a holistic view of students, not just focusing on their misconduct. By utilizing multiple measures in the 8 domains, SANCTION supports conduct professionals in developing equitable sanctions across cases or in large, complex cases. And SANCTION provides a simple, relatively objective score that helps guide the sanctioning process while respecting the expertise of you, the user. If you have questions or comments you want to add, feel free to leave them on the appropriate social media channels. However, also contact us at info@studentdevassociates.com. And remember, we're Student Development Associates, helping you help students.